So, hello. We're coming into the week. Monday, back to work for people who have jobs. I have so much on my mind all the time. I'm finding a peace with it in some way that it is my charge to just be the sin eater that swallows all his evil, just like in my novel. And if that means I have to be alone and seem like a lunatic and he can be cool and like hang out at his parties, but I know that's not true. But that's fine with me. Right? I don't need fame. I never needed fame. I saw something in that script and now I see what it is. Right? That those women needed to see, right? That how he treats them isn't cool. That they were right. And now they have, and if he holds them forever, then it's just like that story David Berlinski said about the Jews all lined up in front of a mass grave with the Nazis. When the one turned around and said, you know, God's watching you, bang, and gets shot in the head. Huh? It's pretty sad to think about how deeply ill he is, how flawed the world is, to vilify me and glorify him, to, right, allow him to make that film like with state tax money, right, for all of their representation to say, oh, well, he says Brian can't prove it legally, so I guess it's not illegal, and never actually like do anything to like know definitively that it can't be proven legally. And I don't believe that it can be proven legally, as far as the penal law, as far as like legislation that has been passed already. Terroristic threats, right? There's any number of laws that kind of sidestep it, but all of these are under the are under the aegis, under the on the foundation that all the parties involved have the facility within themselves to tell the truth without being in fear. Right? And so, if the reality is that Quentin is holding his wife's phone, preventing her from coming to me, let's just say that Sydney and Mikey is bullshit. Let's say that they're like getting dicked down by like a bunch of hot dudes in LA, and right, they don't give a fuck about me. Right? It could be, because I don't give a fuck about them any more than I feel like my spiritual eye is telling me that maybe they need help. But let's just say that it's Daniela. Let's just say that like she's the one that is like hot American, looks like my father, he's a good singer. That's who I want to spend my time with. Right? It's only a crime if, right, if she tells people he's holding her phone. Right? If she can tell people, oh, he's holding my kids, you know, he can't, like I can't go to this man because I'm worried he's going to murder my kids. You get it? Right? And so, in that way, doesn't it kind of justify everyone lying? Doesn't it kind of, you at least you have a palpable intellectual reason, right, which is fear. Right? Because those children can't defend themselves because they're young, you know? And so in that way, right? Calculations, decisions, psychic prohibition, spiritual enslavement, all of these things, right? Like maybe Mike does want to say something. Maybe Mike and Ari and, you know, Courtney Braun, all these people, they do recognize that how deeply ill he is, right? But if he's, right, If he's holding a machete right outside of his kid's room saying you still want to see Brian, still want to talk to Brian, then it kind of, right? Kind of makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? But I know that I can't ever, right? We can't ever outrun each other. There's no, we can reconcile. He can burn every copy of that movie. And we can do it again. Right. Where everyone has equal say. Right? But if the truth is that he does have a genetic deficiency, and so he exercises his right as a psychic because he hates the world, because it reminds him of the God that jilted him, that made him broken, then it stands to reason that he doesn't care what anyone else has to say. And if he can't control you as a psychic, then he can't respect you as a person. Because if you look him in the eye and say, your magic's bullshit, God divines, you interact with me like a person, then every time he thinks about that person, whomever they may be, then he's reminded of the fact that he was made broken, right, by the power that he wields to control everyone else. And so I keep talking about it. I keep writing. I keep having love in my heart. I keep praying for Mikey Madison, Daniela, Sydney, Sophia, Inez de Ramon. And it's sad, you know, it's... I can't keep crying about it, and I can't... I want to. I want to embrace all of them and say, I get it. I've always understood. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough. And I know that they're not mad at me about that. That they never could have guessed that he would completely lose his mind and exact such a sadistic campaign over everyone that they're all just like enslaved to this idea that they can't resolve it except on Quentin's terms. You know? There's an evolutionary biologist, I forget his name, but he says that instances of genetic change in terms of evolution stem from moments of cataclysm. They don't stem from generations of slow change. They stem from instances of stability that emerge through cataclysm. Right? If we take, for instance, the idea that life began in the ocean and came up out into, right, what is that one fish, the mud flapper, that like has these like crude lungs and it can like kind of walk, but like it's like primarily gills. Does it not stand to reason that is it impossible to see how if in the primordial ooze, right, of the Paleolithic ocean, or even farther back, I don't know. I don't know the ages like in like an encyclopedic way, but is it not possible that all of those millions of years ago, if the Earth is not 6,000 years old and flat, that there could have been like some sort of magnetic maybe perturbation through solar flares or tectonic activity through the shifting of the plates that caused every single volcano underneath the ocean surface to erupt simultaneously. And so the whole ocean, right, in a matter of days, became so polluted with ash, with soot, that it became this gray, chalky stew, right? That the lungs, the gills of all the fish could no longer filter the oxygen by swimming through the material. And so 99.5% of all life died in that instance. But that 0.5%, the mud flapper fish, you get it? That they just kept like looking, they kept just like, oh, how do I get out, right? And then they end up flopping up onto the, right? And out of that 0.5%, right, there was one fish that had a dormant mushroom spore inside of its gills. You get it? And so the atmospheric fluctuations, anyone who knows anything about mycology, they know that it comes in the same way, doesn't it? That, if you're in the mountains, you have like a night where it like rains all night, that the saturation of the soil engenders the fruiting of the mycelium into the mushroom. And which is to say, great change, great cataclysm. Does it not stand to reason that spore, in that rarefied instance, only in that 2% of that 0.5%, could be so cataclysmically discombobulated or confused by the change in barometric pressure, change in atmospheric conditions out of the water into the open air, that it would compel the mycelial mat inside of the gill of the fish, the spores inside of the gill of the fish, to fruit into a mushroom, right? Which behaved like a crude lung. If you remember, the inside of the, underneath the cap is called the gill, isn't it? So if the spore blooms out through the full width of the gill, right, and the cap is going inside, could not the gill of the mushroom act as a primordial crude lung, right, which acted as a buffer between the gill and the circulatory system and oxygenated the circulatory system? And I suspect that was a miserable existence, right? I suspect that did not feel good. That they were in miserable pain the entire time. They lived long enough to fuck and then died. Right? But could we not be in a similar situation now? Where everything's been all fine, like peachy keen, and there's been like a faction in Hollywood, like the Denzel Washingtons, and people who said, no, that Quentin, he's a weird guy. That's too much. That's too much. I'm not interested in like doing whatever the fuck like he's doing. Right, but everything's still kind of like operated, like, right? And he just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Right? And then he wrote this film to exact a deeply sadistic black magic spell over the world. Right? And then I wrote. Right? Are we not in a kind of transformative moment right now? Right? Where Quentin is the mud flapper, right? That he's come out of the ocean, right? And I'm the spore. You get it? That represents him having a heart, having a conscience. Right? And so now I've bloomed inside of his gills, right? And I'm allowing him to breathe. Right? But it exacts a misery upon his body, a misery upon his psyche, that is so absolute, it's just crippling him into truly sadistic evil. And he's just lost on the surface of the world for the first time, not knowing like how to behave, because he's finally like face to face with another writer, with another like person, like in his ocean, saying, like, the way that you behave is in fact unhealthy, and it's sick, and I want to help you. I want you to be happy, but I can't accept your terms. I can't accept the idea that you just get to treat me like a monkey in a cage, and I don't have any say in how I'm treated. Right? Could that not kind of makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Right? I still kind of remember that biologist's name. He's a really famous guy. Someone else maybe mention him in the comments, but he's been around forever. Right? And so, right, when I think about learning Django Reinhardt, and how I specifically put in my letter, I didn't learn this to impress you. If we take what I'm saying as gospel, and he wanted to see if I could learn it. Right? Then is he not just treating me like a monkey in a cage? Then has he not been just treating me like a monkey in a cage the whole time? Where he could have reached out and said, you say you're a virtuoso, I want to see you learn this. Instead, he played a weird mind game, and I learned it in 2 days, 3 days, not a long time. Right? But that upsets me a lot, thinking about me saying, oh, like, cool, I learned this thing, like, not realizing for so long that I only learned it because of him. Because of him, like, playing his mind games. And how he likely resented me for it on some level. That he kept trying to, like, create excuses for why he couldn't use me, you know. And then when I didn't give him what he wanted, he finally was like, oh, there it is, see, I can't control him. Never appreciating that he has a bunch of sadistic sexual shit in his film, and therefore, right, if he wants to compel specific women to do these scenes, right, that he has kind of stepped into, right, criminal territory if he refuses to let them not do the film, right? Like they all have money. Like, oh, breach of contract? Like, they don't care about that. They don't, like, what does that mean? Oh, $5 million? Boom, done. Right? But if he's like the mud flapper, you get it? When he's just like floundering, he's like in pain, he's like breathing for the first, like, oh, goddamn, the sun, it's so fucking bright, like, oh, I can't go back the way that I went because, like, I'll die if I, like, do that. Right? Right? And so the book that I pull a lot of that from is called Aquagenesis, the story of evolution and life in the sea. And it's a PhD, I can't remember his name, but it's a really interesting book. They talk about the origins of the cell, and it's all speculation. No one actually knows anything, but... Yeah. And of course the idea of the spore, that's all me. That's all like spiritual... Right? I'm not saying that I deserve to be a movie star. I'm not saying that I look forward to Quentin killing himself when I'm fucking his wife. You know, like, that's not... It upsets me a lot that this has likely been about love the entire time. And Quentin is a goblin, and Quentin is... He hates himself so much that he always thought... I don't know what he thought, honestly. As far as Daniela... Why her family haven't replied to me at all. I keep thinking about those letters, and I keep thinking about the first letters I wrote, you know. I wrote, you know, when I wrote the first one, which would have been the 5th letter, technically, in December of 2023, I mentioned Daniela. I looked her up, and I saw that she was Israeli, and I said, oh, I hope that, you know, something to the effect of, oh, I hope your family is okay. You know, like, that's not, because October 7th had just occurred, if you recall, 2023. Hamas, ain't it? You know, I don't know. I know that they're all deeply troubled over there spiritually and philosophically and politically and, you know, all these things. But if Quentin treats her like a bird in a cage because he only actually married her to lie to himself, then, you know, as arrogant as this may sound, perhaps she did get a little googly-eyed. You know, like, I don't mean anything by that. You know, like, I'm not, like, that doesn't interest me at all. The idea of, like, an American man, like, just, like, saying something to her, like, not caring who her husband is. And the fact that I look like her father, you know, like, all these things. What can I say? Right? But if it's all about the women, right? If it's all about him, like, coming to terms with his feminine side, which is the acknowledgement that he is broken biologically, physically, then does it not make sense that if he can't control me as a psychic, that he would have a complete psychological collapse if those women all looked at him and said, we don't like your games either. We need him. Right? Okay, it's not about you anymore. It's not like, okay, we did it your way, but now guess what? Like, he's still hot, and we want to speak to him because he doesn't understand that this is about us and not you. Does that not kind of makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? That he's just been raging ever since. Right? And so this is the point that I made in the last email that I sent. Right? Let's just say that after Tribeca, right, everything is like everyone's on the same page. Right? Let's just say that, okay, like you want to say that, like, oh, I'm like struggling with sort of mental health shit, right? Just give me that much leeway. Just give me all the way through Tribeca, right? That he canceled the film because he thought maybe like he wanted to use me, but he needed to see me like submit as a psychic. Don't worry about the women. Don't worry about the wife. Don't worry about any of that. Just like it's his movie and he has these standards, right? And says, okay, here's your shot. Right? If that's true, right? And I failed my perverse initiation, why wouldn't they make the film immediately? Why would they wait 15 months from then? Right? 14 months from then to shoot the film. If everyone was like stoked on Brad Pitt and like, yeah, cool, like, yeah, like, okay, whatever, like maybe you give him a shot. Right? Does that make sense to anyone? Right? If he's been like prepping this film, they were supposed to shoot it in September of 2023, you get it? So by that point, by June of 2024, it had been almost a full year since they were supposed to begin principal photography. Right? So if they were doing pre-production because SAG was on strike, right, then it kind of all tracks, it kind of all works as to why they wouldn't begin until after Tribeca. Right? If he was like thinking about me, right? But if that's true, if it has nothing to do with the women, if it has nothing to do with everyone around him, why wouldn't he say, okay, I can wash my hands. I'll give him a shot. And start making the film immediately with Brad. Right? Doesn't make any fucking sense, does it? Unless, right? He's been waiting on me to see this entire time. And because of my celibacy, because of like my inability to see like my sexual identity, I couldn't see that this is about the women. And so he's been holding them in this disgusting quasi-criminal fashion under a sadistic reign of terror, up to and including keeping them locked, holding their phones, right? Exacting a deep sexual sadistic torture upon them every time they leave the house to prevent them from coming to me, to prevent them, right, from gaining their independence. Because it was, in fact, the women who always wanted me to play the role. Because the script is so sadistic and sexual. And they understood what he wanted, that he wanted the actor who played that role to forcibly penetrate them in front of him on his set, to forcibly conceive a baby on his set. And when they saw me, and saw me playing guitar and singing songs and like being genuine and not talking about them at all, right? Not mentioning them at all. Does it not kind of like make a lot of sense actually for them to say he's the only one who can like make a case that has nothing to do with tying us up and fucking us? Don't you, like, doesn't that mean anything to you? Because like it means everything to us, and we don't want to do the movie with anyone else. Doesn't that kind of makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Right? And because everyone around him is so spineless, right, they just let him do whatever he wants, up to and including forcing them to sign NDAs, forcing them to sign waivers, right? Forcing them to sign, whatever of, like permission waivers, all these things, forcing them into first-degree bondage rape scenes and thinking that those pieces of paper can keep him out of trouble. Because I can argue that it's legal duress, and therefore it's technically null and void. Because he knew that they didn't really want to sign it, right? He knew that they were, in fact, disgusted with him. And we're only signing it out of pure terror over what he might actually do if they actually say no and walk away. You get it? Right? You don't have to actually have a gun against someone's head to make them know that their life is in danger. Right? if Quentin knows that the five of us being together means that his control over the world as a psychic has come to an end, why wouldn't he do everything in his power if he's so deeply ill? All he can see is the fact that he's whole as a psychic. You understand? So, right? Have all the journalists, right? Have they all signed NDAs too? Is that like, has Fish signed an NDA? Right? Like, how does he just bully all these people into something? Like, I can get it with the women because he's been in their mind. Like, he has an unhealthy spiritual possession of these women as a result of exercising his clairvoyance in a disgusting capacity over them. That's a pretty easy sell. But David Berlinski, right? Stephen Meyer, Claire Berlinski, right? All these things, right? Like, how did he convince them to sign anything? Or are they just so terrified of litigation that they refuse to say something? Like, he can't win. That's the point. He can't win. What can you do? Right? Did those cats that published Edward Snowden's papers? It was The Guardian. They're still publishing. That's the point. Right? So, I suppose I'll go. But it's really sad, like, how alone they all feel. I feel that. I feel that they can't talk about it with anyone. They have no... Right? I can't talk about it with anyone. They can't talk about it with anyone. Right? Quentin's keen on keeping everyone spiritually enslaved, right? Keeping everyone on this schizophrenic frequency where no one knows the full truth. It's all half measures and micromanaging, right? That's the NASA joke, isn't it? That's like the flat Earth joke, that everything's so compartmentalized because no one actually knows anything, and because the Earth's actually flat. And I'm not saying that, but that's like the joke in my novel about how time, you could travel through time if space is fixed. That's like the joke that Max makes. And I don't know that that's true. I'm not going to allege to understand anything. Relativity. Right? But what I'm saying is, if you're so completely consumed by a person spiritually and esoterically and physically and psychically, does it not stand to reason that you in fact wouldn't even say anything to your licensed therapist? Because if you were forthright and candid with them, then they would have no choice but to report Quentin to the authorities. So, something to consider. God bless.